The snow fell heavy that night, each flake catching the weak moonlight like bits of broken glass. June Laramie pulled her worn wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, her fingers stiff with cold as she guided the broken-down wagon to a stop. The axle had snapped clean through 2 miles back, and she'd walked the rest of the way, following the faint glow of lamplight through the trees. Gold Hollow lay somewhere behind her in the darkness, but she couldn't turn back now. Not with Mary still missing. Not with winter settling in hard. Her younger sister had been gone 3 weeks now, chasing after some smooth-talking prospector who'd promised her silk dresses and a house in San Francisco. June knew better. She'd seen too many girls disappear into the mining camps, never to return. The cabin sat lone and solid against the hillside, smoke curling from its stone chimney. June had spotted it from the ridge, the only sign of life for miles. Her boots crunched through fresh snow as she approached, each step deliberate despite her exhaustion. She'd been walking for hours, her skirts heavy with ice, her breath coming in small white puffs. She raised her fist to knock, then hesitated. A woman alone, seeking shelter from a stranger. She knew the risks, but the alternative was freezing to death in the Wyoming wilderness. And June Laramie hadn't come this far to die in a snowbank. Her knuckles rapped against the rough pine door, the sound sharp in the still night air. Once, twice, then silence. She heard movement inside the scrape of a chair, heavy footsteps on wooden planks. The door opened just a crack, and she found herself staring down the barrel of a Winchester rifle. "State your business." The voice was low, careful, not threatening exactly, but not welcoming either. "My wagon broke down," June said, keeping her hands visible, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her chest. "I'm looking for my sister. Been tracking her from Laramie. Just need somewhere warm for the night." The door opened wider, revealing the man behind the rifle. Elias Boone stood tall in the doorframe, his dark hair touched with early gray, his eyes the color of winter slate. He wore no coat despite the cold, just a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, suspenders hanging loose at his sides. His face bore the weathered look of a man who'd spent years under the harsh western sun. But there was something else there, too, a kind of careful stillness that spoke of old grief. "You alone?" he asked, lowering the rifle but not setting it aside. "Yes. No husband coming after you. No brothers." June lifted her chin. "I've got no one but the sister I'm searching for." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her ice-crusted shawl, her cracked leather boots, the determined set of her jaw. She didn't look away, didn't beg or plead, just waited. "Storm's getting worse," he said finally, stepping back from the door. "Come in before you freeze." The cabin's interior was sparse but clean, a single room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in the corner, a table and 2 chairs. Books lined one wall, their leather spines catching the firelight. Not what she'd expected from a mountain recluse. June moved toward the fire immediately, her frozen fingers seeking warmth. She heard him bar the door behind her, set the rifle back on its pegs. When she turned, he was watching her with those careful eyes. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll take the chair." "I don't need," June started, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "You're half frozen and exhausted. Take the bed." She wanted to argue, her pride flaring up like kindling, but the warmth of the fire was already making her eyelids heavy, and she could feel the bone-deep weariness settling in. "Just the floor would be fine," she said. "I don't want to put you out." Something shifted in his expression then, so quick she almost missed it. A flicker of amusement, maybe, or understanding. "The floor's cold," he said, moving to add another log to the fire. "But if you promise to wake up as mine tomorrow morning, I'll let you sleep wherever you choose." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and strangely intimate. June felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. "What kind of promise is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned from the fireplace, and for the first time, She saw the ghost of a smile touch his lips, the kind a lonely man makes when a beautiful woman appears at his door in the middle of a snowstorm, the kind that means I'll keep you safe tonight, ask nothing of you, and hope you'll still be here come morning. June studied his face in the firelight, searching for deception, for danger, but all she found was a kind of raw honesty that made her chest tight. "Just let me sleep tonight," she said quietly. "Come morning, you can ask whatever you want." He nodded, accepting her terms. "There's stew in the pot, still warm. Eat something before you sleep." She hadn't realized how hungry she was until he mentioned food. He ladled thick venison stew into a bowl, set it on the table with a chunk of rough bread. June ate slowly, aware of him moving around the cabin, banking the fire, pulling extra blankets from a trunk. "What's your name?" she asked between bites. "Elias Boone. And you?" June Laramie." "Like the fort." "Like the town? My father had grand ideas about Wyoming territory. Thought he'd strike it rich in the gold fields." She took another spoonful of stew. "He died broke, same as most of them do." Elias said nothing, but she felt his attention like a physical weight. When she finished eating, he took the bowl, washed it in a basin by the window. "The bed's yours," he said again. "I've put extra blankets there." June stood, suddenly awkward, in the warmth of the cabin, with food in her belly. The strangeness of the situation struck her fully. Here she was, about to sleep in a stranger's bed, miles from anywhere, with only his word that she'd wake safely. But something about Elias Boone made her trust when she shouldn't. Maybe it was the books on his shelves, or the careful way he moved around her, maintaining distance. Maybe it was the sadness in his eyes that matched her own. She moved to the bed, sat on its edge. The mattress was firm, the blankets rough but clean. "Thank you," she said, "for the shelter, for the food." He settled into the chair by the fire, pulling a blanket around his shoulders. "Get some rest. June Laramie. Morning comes early in the mountains." She lay down fully clothed, pulling the blankets up to her chin. The bed smelled of pine smoke and something else, leather and soap and man. Through half-closed eyes, she watched him in the firelight, this stranger who'd taken her in, who'd made that odd promise about morning. "Elias," she said softly. That promise you wanted, about waking up as yours, what did you really mean?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I meant that sometimes a man sees his future walk through his door on a winter night, and sometimes he's fool enough to speak it out loud." June closed her eyes, a smile touching her lips despite everything: her broken wagon, her missing sister, the uncertain road ahead. "Then I promise," she whispered. "I'll wake up tomorrow. After that, we'll see." She heard him shift in his chair, heard the fire pop and settle. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering her tracks, covering the broken wagon, covering the whole world in white. But inside the cabin, she was warm and safe, and for the first time in weeks, June Laramie let herself truly rest. Just before sleep took her, she heard him speak once more, his voice barely audible over the crackling fire. "Sleep well, June. I'll keep watch." And he did. All through the long winter night, Elias Boone sat by the fire, guarding the woman who'd knocked on his door, who'd made a promise she didn't yet understand. Come morning, everything would change. But for now, in the quiet of his cabin, with snow sealing them away from the world, they were just two lonely souls sharing warmth against the cold. June woke to the sound of wood being added to the fire, the soft scrape and thud pulling her from dreams of endless snow. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back. The broken wagon, the lonely cabin, the man with sad eyes who'd offered her his bed. She kept her breathing even, not ready to face the morning just yet. Through barely opened eyes, she watched Elias move about the cabin. He worked quietly, each movement deliberate and careful, as if trying not to wake her. His hair was mussed from sleep or lack of it, and she noticed the stiffness in his shoulders as he stretched. He'd kept his word. He'd slept in that chair all night. A soft cough escaped her before she could stop it. Just a small sound, but enough to draw his attention. He turned from the fireplace, and their eyes met across the dim room. "Morning," he said simply. "Snow's still coming down hard. Looks like the pass will be blocked for days." June sat up slowly, aware of her wrinkled dress, her hair falling loose from its pins. "I should check on my wagon, see if anything can be salvaged." "Already did." He moved to the stove, where a kettle was beginning to steam. "Walked out at first light. Your axles broke clean through, and the snow's buried most of it by now. You're not going anywhere for a while." The reality of her situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. Trapped here, with a stranger, while Mary got farther away with each passing hour. She pushed down the panic, forced herself to think clearly. "I can pay for lodging," she said, reaching for the small purse at her belt. "I have some money saved. Keep it." His voice was firm, but not unkind. "You'll need it when the snow clears." He poured hot water into 2 cups, added what looked like dried herbs. The smell was pleasant, earthy and slightly sweet. When he handed her a cup, their fingers brushed briefly, and June felt that same strange flutter from the night before. "Chamomile and wintergreen," he said, settling back into his chair. "Grows wild in the summer, good for cold mornings." She sipped the tea, grateful for its warmth. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the snow falling steady outside the windows. It should have been awkward, this forced intimacy with a stranger, but somehow it wasn't. "You kept your promise," she said finally. He looked at her over his cup. "Which one?" "To keep me safe, to ask nothing of me." "Night's not the same as morning," he said quietly. "And you kept yours too. You woke up." "As yours." The words came out before she could stop them, and heat rushed to her cheeks. But Elias didn't smile or press the advantage. Instead, he stood, moved to the window to look out at the white world beyond. "That's not a claim a man can make on a woman he's just met. I spoke out of turn last night." Something in his voice, a kind of resigned loneliness, made June set down her cup. "You didn't ask my story," she said. "Most men would have by now. About why I'm traveling alone, searching for my sister." "Figure you'll tell it when you're ready. Or not." He turned from the window. "Hungry, I can make breakfast." They prepared the meal together, moving around each other in the small space with surprising ease. June found the eggs while he sliced bacon. She mixed biscuit dough while he tended the fire. It was domestic in a way that should have felt strange, but didn't. "You know your way around a kitchen," she observed, watching him flip the bacon with practiced ease. "Been alone a long time. Man learns or goes hungry." He paused, then added, "Used to cook for others. Once, large groups." There was a story there. She could tell, but he didn't offer it and she didn't ask. Instead, she shaped the biscuits, placed them in the Dutch oven he'd prepared. Her cough came again, stronger this time, and she turned away to cover it. "You're getting sick," he said, not a question. "It's nothing, just the cold from last night." But when the coughing fit passed, she found him studying her with those careful gray eyes. "There's a bed here and food enough for 2. No sense in you heading back out into that storm, even if you could." "I can't impose." "It's not imposing if I'm offering." They ate breakfast at the small table, knees almost touching in the cramped space. The food was simple but good, and June found herself relaxing despite everything. Elias ate with the same deliberate care he did everything else, and she wondered what had made him so cautious, so contained. After breakfast, while she helped wash dishes, her cough worsened. This time, she couldn't hide the way her shoulders shook with it, the way she had to grip the table for support. "That's enough," Elias said firmly. "Back to bed with you." "I'm fine." "You're not." He dried his hands, moved toward her with intent. You're burning up with fever, and that cough settling into your chest. I've seen it before. You need rest." June wanted to argue, but another coughing fit stole her breath. When it passed, she found Elias's hand on her elbow, steady and warm. "Let me help," he said softly. "No obligations, no expectations. Just let me help." She allowed him to guide her back to the bed, too tired to protest when he pulled the blankets up to her chin. Her eyes were already closing when she felt something else, his coat, the heavy wool one from the peg by the door, being laid over the blankets. "You'll be cold," she murmured. "I'll be fine." His hand touched her forehead briefly, checking for fever. "Sleep now." But sleep didn't come easy. The fever made her restless, and she drifted in and out of strange dreams. Sometimes she woke to find Elias adding wood to the fire. Once, she opened her eyes to see him reading by lamplight, his profile stern in concentration. And late in the night, when the coughing shook her whole body, she woke to find him beside the bed with a cup of something warm and honeyed. "Drink," he said, supporting her shoulders. "It'll help the cough." She sipped the mixture, tasted honey and something medicinal. "What is it?" "Old remedy. Pine needle tea with honey and a few other things." He eased her back against the pillows. "My mother used to make it." "Is she—" "Gone. Long time now." He adjusted the coat over her blankets. "Rest. I'll be here." And he was, each time she woke, disoriented and coughing, he was there, not hovering, not intrusive, just present. He read his books. He tended the fire. He made more tea. And when the fever made her shake with chills, he pulled his chair closer to the bed, close enough that she could hear him breathing, feel his solid presence. Dawn came gray and dim through the snow-covered windows. June woke, feeling clearer, the fever broken, though the cough lingered. Elias was asleep in his chair, a book open on his lap, his head tilted back at what must have been an uncomfortable angle. She studied him in the pale light, this stranger who'd taken her in, who'd spent 2 nights now watching over her. There were lines around his eyes, a scar on his jaw she hadn't noticed before. His hands, resting on the book, were calloused but clean, with the long fingers that suggested they'd once done finer work than mountain living required. He stirred, caught her watching, but didn't seem embarrassed. "Feeling better?" "Yes, thank you." She pushed herself up to sitting, noticing how he immediately moved back, giving her space. "You kept your promise again." "Which one this time?" "The one where you said you'd be here." He closed the book, set it aside. "Made you another promise too, if I recall." June felt her cheeks warm. "About waking up as yours." "That one wasn't fair," he said, standing to stretch. "A man shouldn't ask such things of a woman who's dependent on his hospitality." "Maybe," June said quietly. "The woman doesn't mind being asked." He stilled, his back to her as he faced the fire. When he turned, there was something raw in his expression, quickly hidden. "You don't know me, June Laramie. Don't know what brought me to this mountain, why I live alone." "No," she agreed. "But I know you gave up your bed for a stranger. I know you stayed up all night when I was sick. I know you read books and make pine needle tea and keep your word when you give it." He moved to the window, looked out at the still falling snow. "The pass won't clear for days yet. You're welcome to stay until it does, but I won't hold you to promises made in fever and storm." June stood on unsteady legs, crossed to stand beside him at the window. The world outside was transformed, white and pristine and impossibly quiet. "Then I'll make you a new promise," she said. "I'll stay until the storm passes. We'll share this space, share meals, share the quiet, and when the snow clears, if you still want me to wake up as yours, well, maybe I'll consider it." He looked down at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, Elias Boone truly smiled. It transformed his face, easing the lines of old grief, revealing the man he might have been before whatever tragedy had driven him to this lonely mountain. "Deal," he said softly. "Though I should warn you, I make terrible company." "Somehow," June said, allowing herself a small smile in return. "I doubt that very much." Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them into their own small world. And in that world, two damaged souls began the careful dance of learning each other, of building trust from shared meals and quiet conversations, and the simple act of keeping promises made in the dark. The morning came quiet and cold, with weak sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows. June woke to the sound of Elias splitting wood outside, the rhythmic thunk of axe meeting log as regular as a heartbeat. She rose slowly, her body still weak from the fever, but her mind clear for the first time in days. She found him by the woodpile, working in just his shirt sleeves despite the bitter cold. His breath came in white clouds, and she watched for a moment as he swung the axe with practiced ease, splitting logs with a single strike. There was something almost meditative in his movements, a man finding peace in simple labor. "You'll catch your death out here without a coat," she called from the doorway. He paused mid-swing, turned to look at her. "Could say the same about you standing there in your stockings." June looked down, realizing she'd forgotten her boots in her hurry to find him. The cold was already seeping through the thin fabric, making her toes curl against the wooden porch. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make breakfast." "Few more logs first." But he was already setting down the axe, gathering an armload of split wood. "You shouldn't be up yet. That fever took a lot out of you." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Boone." "Just Elias," he said, brushing past her with the wood. "And I don't doubt it. Woman traveling alone through Wyoming winter, you'd have to be strong." Inside, June busied herself with breakfast preparations while Elias stacked the new wood by the fireplace. She found his small store of supplies: flour, salt pork, dried beans, coffee. Not much variety, but enough to work with. She mixed batter for flapjacks, sliced the salt pork thin, put coffee on to boil. "You move like someone who's fed a household," he observed, washing his hands in the basin. "3 younger sisters and 2 brothers, June said, flipping the first flapjack. "Mother died when I was 12. Someone had to keep food on the table." "And your father? Dreamer, always chasing the next big strike, the next sure thing. He'd disappear for months at a time, come back with empty pockets and grand stories." She slid a flapjack onto a plate, poured more batter. "Mary, my youngest sister, she inherited that dreaming streak. That's why I'm out here, chasing after her and some smooth talker who promised her the moon." Elias set plates on the table, moving around her with that careful grace she was beginning to recognize. "How old is she?" 17. Old enough to think she knows everything, young enough to believe a pretty lie. June's voice caught slightly. "I should have watched her closer." "Not your fault." His voice was firm. "People make their own choices, even when they're young." Something in his tone made her look at him sharply, but his face revealed nothing. They sat down to breakfast, the morning sun finally strong enough to cast pale squares of light across the table. "Your turn," June said after a few bites. "I've told you about my family. What about yours?" Elias was quiet for a long moment, cutting his flapjack with precise movements. "Had a wife once, a son." The past tense hung heavy between them. June waited, not pushing. "The boy took fever when he was 6, scarlet fever. I was away, traveling circuit." He set down his fork. "By the time I got back, he was gone. Martha, my wife, she never forgave me for not being there. Maybe she was right not to." "You said traveling circuit? You were a preacher." "Minister. Had a congregation down in Cheyenne. Little church on the edge of town." His smile was bitter. "Spent so much time tending everybody else's souls, I forgot to tend my own family. After Jacob died, Martha left, went back east to her people. I resigned my position, came up here." "How long ago?" 4 winters now." He picked up his coffee cup, stared into it like it might hold answers. Haven't been off this mountain except for supplies since... June reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but letting hers rest near it. I'm sorry. About your boy. About all of it. Not your burden to carry. But he didn't pull his hand away. Point is, we all got our ghosts. Yours is out there somewhere in a mining camp. Mine's buried in Cheyenne with a headstone I can't bear to visit. They finished breakfast in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. June insisted on washing dishes while Elias fixed a loose board on the porch. The domestic routine felt natural, as if they'd been sharing this space for years instead of days. Later, as the sun climbed higher, Elias showed her his book collection. She ran her fingers along the spines, theology texts mixed with poetry, philosophy alongside practical guides to mountain living. You can read whatever you like, he said. Gets lonely up here without conversation, even if it's just with dead writers. June pulled out a volume of Wordsworth, thumbed through it. You miss it preaching. Sometimes miss having purpose. Maybe miss feeling like what I did mattered. He shrugged. But I failed at the most important thing. Hard to stand in a pulpit and talk about God's love when you couldn't save your own child. That wasn't failing, June said softly. That was just life, cruel, unfair life. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the depth of pain he'd been carrying. Martha said the same thing, said it was God's will, but what kind of God takes a 6-year-old boy? What kind of plan requires that? June had no answer. She'd asked similar questions when her mother died, when her father chose gold over family, when Mary ran off with a man who would likely abandon her. Instead of speaking, she moved closer, let her shoulder touch his as they stood before the bookshelf. I know about train stations, she said quietly. Elias frowned, confused. Train stations. Being left at them, not Ella's story exactly, but close enough. June kept her eyes on the books. I was 16. There was a boy man, really, Samuel Morrison, worked at the bank, had nice hands and nicer words, convinced me to run away with him, said we'd be married in Denver. She felt Elias go still beside her, listening. Got as far as the Laramie station before he changed his mind, said he'd made a mistake, that his prospects were better without a wife to slow him down. Left me standing on that platform with my one bag and what was left of my dignity. She touched a theology text. Remembering, had to walk back home, face my father's disappointment, the town's whispers. Raised my siblings with everyone knowing I'd been fool enough to trust a man's pretty words. June. Point is, she continued, turning to face him, we've all been left somewhere, all been fools for love or duty or dreams. Doesn't mean we stop trying. Doesn't mean we hide on mountains for the rest of our lives. Elias studied her face, and she saw something shift in his expression. You're not much for letting a man wallow, are you? Not when he's got perfectly good flapjack batter going to waste. She smiled, trying to lighten the moment. Besides, somebody's got to keep that fire going, and I'm still too weak to split wood. That drew an almost smile from him. Practical woman. Practicals kept me alive this long. They spent the afternoon in quiet companionship. June read while Elias repaired various things around the cabin, a loose hinge, a gap in the chinking between logs. When her cough returned, he made more pine needle tea without being asked. When the sun started to sink, they prepared dinner together, moving around each other with increasing ease. As they ate their simple meal of beans and cornbread, June found herself studying his hands. They were strong, calloused from work, but there was a gentleness to them she'd noticed when he'd tended her during the fever. Hands that had once blessed congregations, baptized babies, held his dying son. What are you thinking? He asked, catching her stare. That your hands remember being kind, she said without thinking, then blushed at her boldness. But Elias didn't look away. Instead, he turned his palm up on the table, an invitation or a question. After a moment's hesitation, June placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers carefully, as if she might break or disappear. "Been a long time since I held a woman's hand," he said quietly. "Been a long time since I let a man hold mine." They sat like that as darkness fell outside. Two damaged people finding comfort in simple touch. The snow had stopped. June noticed, and stars were beginning to appear in the clear night sky. Tomorrow or the next day, the pass might be clear. She could continue her search for Mary, leave this cabin and its sad-eyed owner behind. But looking at their joined hands on the rough wooden table, June found herself hoping for just a little more snow. Just a few more days in this quiet place where ghosts could rest and wounded hearts could start, maybe, to remember what it felt like to heal. "Elias," she said softly. Thank you for telling me about Jacob. About Martha?" His thumb moved slightly against her palm. "Thank you for telling me about the train station, about Samuel Morrison and his nice hands." She laughed, surprising them both. His hands weren't nearly as nice as I thought. Too soft, banker's hands. "And what kind of hands do you prefer?" "June Laramie." She looked at their intertwined fingers. His weathered and strong, hers work-worn but steady. "Ones that know how to hold on," she said simply. "Ones that don't let go at train stations." He squeezed her hand gently, and they sat in the lamplight as the fire burned low, neither quite ready to let go, both afraid and hopeful of what might come when the snow finally cleared. The morning dawned crisp and bright, the kind of clear winter day that made the snow sparkle like scattered diamonds. June found Elias outside, checking his trap lines, and convinced him she was well enough for a short walk. "Just to the ridge," she said, wrapping her shawl tight. "I need to see if the pass is clearing." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay close. Snow's deep off the path, and there's hollows that'll swallow you whole." They set out together, Elias leading the way through paths only he could see. The snow crunched beneath their boots, and June's breath came in white puffs that crystallized in the frigid air. Despite the cold, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in weeks. "There," Elias said, pointing to tracks in the snow. "Rabbit, see how the back feet land ahead of the front?" June crouched to look closer, fascinated by the delicate pattern. "You trap them?" "When I need to. Mostly I hunt deer in the fall, smoke the meat for winter." He moved on, showing her other signs where deer had bedded down, scratch marks where a raccoon had searched for food. Mountain tells you everything if you know how to listen. "My father never taught us any of this," June said, struggling slightly in the deeper snow. "Said women didn't need to know hunting ways." "Your father was wrong about a lot of things. Seems like—" Elias offered his hand to help her over a fallen log. "Knowledge keeps you alive out here. Doesn't matter if you're man or woman." She took his hand, noting how natural it felt now, how easily he steadied her. They'd found a rhythm in the past days, a careful dance of mutual respect and growing comfort. At the ridge, they paused to catch their breath. The valley spread below them, white and pristine. The pass still choked with snow, but showing signs of settling. "Another 2-3 days," Elias said. "Then you could make it to Gold Hollow." June nodded, surprised by the pang of disappointment in her chest. "My sister could be anywhere by now." "Could be, or she could be waiting in the next town, wondering why her big sister hasn't come to drag her home yet." "You don't know Mary. She's stubborn as a mule when she sets her mind to something." June pulled her shawl tighter. "Gets that from me, I suppose. Stubborn's not always bad." Elias said. "Kept you walking through a blizzard to find her. Kept you alive when that banker left you at the station." They stood quietly for a moment, looking out at the vast wilderness. Then June noticed something glinting in a nearby tree, strips of metal hanging from the branches, tinkling softly in the breeze. "What are those?" Elias's face tightened slightly. "Markers. This is as far as I walked with Jacob the last day he was well. He loved the sound they made. June moved closer to the tree, listening to the gentle chiming. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small thimble, tarnished silver, worn smooth with use. "This was my mother's," she said, holding it up to catch the light. "I've carried it everywhere since she died. Maybe it would like to sing with the others." Elias looked at her, something raw and grateful in his eyes. He took the thimble carefully, tied it to a branch with a strip of leather from his pocket. It joined the chorus of metal pieces, adding its own sweet note to the mountain music. "Thank you," he said simply. On the walk back, he showed her how to set a simple snare, how to read weather in the clouds. June absorbed it all, filing away each piece of knowledge. When they reached a small frozen stream, he knelt to point out mink tracks, and she found herself studying the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, the careful way he moved through his world. Back at the cabin, June noticed his shirt had torn at the shoulder, probably caught on a branch during their walk. "Give me that," she said, pointing to the tear. "I'll mend it." "It's fine." "It's not fine. It'll only get worse." She fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. "Shirt, off. I know you have another." He hesitated, then disappeared into the corner where he kept his few clothes. When he returned, he'd changed shirts and handed her the torn one. June found her sewing kit in her bag, one of the few things she'd managed to save from the wagon, and settled by the window where the light was best. "You came prepared," Elias observed, watching her thread the needle with practiced ease. "Always carry needle and thread. Never know when something needs fixing." She began working on the tear, her stitches small and even. "Used to make all the children's clothes. Made my father's shirts, too, when he bothered to come home." "He didn't deserve you." June looked up, surprised by the heat in his voice. "Maybe not, but children don't get to choose their fathers." "No," Elias agreed quietly. "They don't." She returned to her sewing, aware of him moving around the cabin, starting preparations for dinner. The domestic peace of it settled around her like a comfortable blanket. When she finished the shoulder, she noticed the cuff was starting to fray too. "Might as well fix this while I'm at it," she said. "You don't have to." "I want to." She glanced at him. "Let me do this. It's what I know how to do. Fix things, make them whole again." He stopped arguing, went back to cutting vegetables for stew. June worked in the fading light, reinforcing the cuff, then checking the other seams. The shirt was well made, but showing its age. Like everything in the cabin, like Elias himself, she thought quality underneath, but worn by time and sorrow. When she finished, she held it up to inspect her work. The repairs were nearly invisible, the kind of careful mending that would last. "Here," she said, handing it back. "Good as new. Better, maybe." He took the shirt, running his thumb over the mended shoulder. "Haven't had anyone—" "Thank you. It's just a shirt. Elias." "No," he said softly. "It's not." That evening, after dinner, he pulled out a worn deck of cards. "Know how to play?" "Depends on the game." They played poker with beans for stakes, June surprising him with her skill. "Another thing Father taught you?" he asked after she won her third hand. "Lord, no. Learned this from the miners who'd come through town. They'd play in the mercantile sometimes, and I'd watch from behind the counter." She grinned. "Got good at reading faces, knowing when someone was bluffing." "And what does my face tell you?" She studied him across the table, taking in the relaxed set of his shoulders, the almost smile playing at his lips. "That you're letting me win." "Prove it." She dealt the next hand, watched him pick up his cards with those careful hands. He had a tell. She'd noticed the slightest tightening around his eyes when he had something good. There it was. "You've got at least 3 of a kind," she said. "Probably queens." He laid down his cards, 3 queens and a pair of 4s. "How did you—" "Your eyes," she said simply. "They change when you think you're going to win." And what do they do when I look at you? The question caught her off guard. June felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. They go soft, she said quietly, like you're seeing something you thought you'd lost. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Maybe I am. They sat like that for a long moment, the fire crackling, the wind picking up outside. Then June turned her hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. I know your name now, she said. Not just Elias, the whole of you, the minister, the father, the man who marks trees with singing metal, the one who teaches stubborn women about rabbit tracks and mends broken things with patience. And I know yours, he replied. June Laramie, seamstress, card sharp, sister who won't give up, woman who puts her mother's thimble on a stranger's memorial tree. We're not strangers anymore. No, he agreed. We're not. Later, as June got ready for bed still in his bed while he took the chair, despite her protests, she found herself humming. It was an old hymn her mother used to sing, something about finding grace in unexpected places. That's beautiful, Elias said from his chair. What is it? Amazing Grace, June said. Mama sang it while she sewed, said the rhythm helped keep her stitches even. I used to preach on that hymn, about being lost and then found, blind, but then seeing. June turned to look at him, silhouetted by the firelight. Do you miss it leading people in worship? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I miss feeling useful, miss being part of something larger than my own grief. You've been useful to me, June said. Gave me shelter, taught me to read the mountain, kept me alive when the fever might have taken me. That's ministry too, isn't it just a different kind? He looked at her then, and she saw something shift in his expression, a loosening, like ice beginning to thaw. June Laramie, you might be the wisest woman I've ever met. Just practical, she said, but she was smiling. Practical and stubborn. Best combination there is. As she settled into bed, June found herself thinking about names and knowing, how you could live with someone for years and never really see them, and how you could know someone for days and feel like you'd found a missing piece of yourself. Elias, she called softly into the darkness. The pass will clear soon. I know. I'm not ready. She heard him shift in his chair, heard the smile in his voice when he answered, Neither am I. The trip to Gold Hollow took most of the morning. Elias had insisted on accompanying her, hitching his old mule to a makeshift sled to carry supplies they both needed. The pass had cleared enough for careful travel, though snow still banked high on either side of the narrow trail. June sat beside him on the sled's bench, acutely aware of how different she must look from the desperate woman who'd knocked on his door a week ago. Her color had returned, her cough had faded, and Elias had helped her repair her worn boots with leather from his stores. But it was more than physical recovery. Something inside her had shifted during those quiet days in the cabin. You don't have to do this, she said, as they descended toward the cluster of buildings that made up Gold Hollow. Come into town with me. Need supplies anyway, he said, but she caught the tension in his shoulders. Haven't been down in months. They'll be expecting me eventually. Gold Hollow wasn't much a main street with a general store, saloon, boarding house, and a few other establishments clinging to life in the shadow of the mountains. But after the isolation of the cabin, it felt overwhelming. June noticed the way people stopped to stare as their sled creaked down the street. That's Boone, someone whispered. The preacher who went hermit. Got a woman with him, another voice added. You don't suppose... June lifted her chin, met the stares directly. She'd dealt with worse whispers in Laramie, but she felt Elias tense beside her, saw his jaw tighten. They stopped at Milligan's general store first. The proprietor, a thin man with suspicious eyes, watched them enter together. Boone, he said, not quite a greeting. Been a while. Walter, Elias nodded, moving to examine the grain bins. Need the usual supplies. June separated to look at fabric, though she had little money to spare. She was examining a bolt of blue calico when she heard a familiar voice that made her blood run cold. "Well, look what the storm blew in. June Laramie, isn't it?" She turned to find Tom Garrett, the blacksmith from Laramie, the same man who'd tried courting her after Samuel left, who'd made her life miserable when she'd refused him. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Mr. Garrett," she said coolly, "you're far from home. Following work, railroads pushing through, needs skilled men." He stepped closer, and she smelled whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. "Heard you were chasing after that wild sister of yours. Didn't expect to find you keeping house with the hermit preacher." "I'm not. No." His smile was ugly. "Spent a week up there alone with him. What I heard, your wagon conveniently broke down right near his cabin. Some might call that lucky. Others might call it something else." June felt heat rise in her cheeks. But before she could respond, Elias appeared at her elbow. He didn't touch her, didn't need to. His presence alone made Garrett step back. "Problem here?" Elias asked quietly. "No problem," Garrett said, but his eyes stayed on June. "Just catching up with an old friend. Didn't know you were taking in strays. Preacher." The lady needed shelter in a storm. Any Christian man would have helped. Elias's voice was steady, but June heard the edge beneath it. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have business to finish." Garrett tipped his hat mockingly. Sure. I'll be around if Miss Laramie wants to. Catch up properly later." After he left, June realized she was shaking. Not from fear, but from anger. "That man," she said quietly, "has been a plague on my life for 2 years. Want me to have a word with him?" "No." She touched his arm briefly. "But thank you." They finished their shopping quickly, the store's other customers giving them wide berth. June noticed the way women whispered behind their hands, the way men's eyes followed them with speculation. Her reputation, whatever remained of it, was taking another blow. Outside, loading the supplies, Elias said, "I'm sorry. I should have known bringing you here would cause talk." "Let them talk," June said firmly. "I've survived worse gossip than this." But the encounter with Garrett had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. As they prepared to leave, she spotted him across the street, talking to a group of railroad workers, gesturing in their direction. "Wait here," she told Elias, and before he could protest, she marched across the street. Mr. Garrett," she said loudly enough for the whole group to hear. "A word." He smirked. "Changed your mind about that catching up?" "I want to be very clear," June said, her voice carrying. "I rejected your suit 2 years ago. I reject it now. I will reject it tomorrow and every day after. No amount of innuendo or ugly implications will change that. Getting awful high and mighty for a woman who what?" June stepped closer. "Who refused to marry a man who thinks persistence is the same as courtship, who left town to find her sister instead of withering away under the weight of small-minded gossip, who took shelter with a good man during a blizzard." She let her voice drop, but kept it clear. "Yes, Mr. Garrett. I stayed in Elias Boone's cabin. He gave me his bed and slept in a chair. He tended me through fever and taught me to read snow sign. He's shown me more genuine kindness in a week than you managed in 2 years of unwanted attention." The men around Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Public scenes like this weren't common, especially from women. "You should learn some shame, woman," Garrett snarled. "And you should learn that a woman's no doesn't mean try harder." June turned to go, then looked back. "Oh, and if you spread any more poison about Mr. Boone or myself, I'll make sure everyone knows about that poker game in Laramie, the one where you lost your shop deed and had to beg Judge Morrison to tear up the paper. Amazing how talkative men get when they're deep in their cups." Garrett's face went red, then white. That particular story was true, and they both knew it. June walked back to where Elias waited by the sled, her head high despite the stares. He helped her up onto the bench without a word, but she saw something in his eyes: surprise, admiration, and something warmer. They were halfway back to the cabin before he spoke. That was impressive. That was necessary. June's hands were still shaking slightly. He would have made trouble otherwise. The poker game. His brother-in-law told me. Garrett doesn't know that I know. She managed a small smile. Sometimes it pays to listen when men think you're not important enough to notice. June Laramie, Elias said slowly. I don't think anyone could fail to notice you. They rode in silence for a while. The only sounds the creak of the sled and the mule's steady breathing. Then Elias said, They'll talk more now, about you staying with me. I know. Doesn't bother you. June thought about it, about reputation and respectability and all the things she'd been taught to value. You know what bothers me? That my sister is still out there somewhere. That good men like you hide on mountains because the world broke them. That women have to choose between safety and reputation. She looked at him. No, Elias, their talk doesn't bother me anymore. They reached the cabin as the sun was starting to sink, while Elias tended to the mule. June put away the supplies, her mind turning over the day's events. The confrontation with Garrett had crystallized something for her. She was tired of living by other people's rules, tired of apologizing for surviving. When Elias came in, she had coffee ready and was mixing dough for biscuits. He watched her work, and she felt the weight of things unsaid between them. I'll need to leave soon, she said finally. To find Mary, but after today. After today, she turned to face him. After today, I know I'll be coming back. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, stopping just short of touching her. June! No, let me say this. She met his eyes steadily. I've spent years doing what was expected, being careful of my reputation, living small so others wouldn't talk. But they talked anyway. They'll always talk. She took a breath. I'd rather they talk about me choosing happiness than settling for safety. Is that what this is? His voice was rough. Happiness. I don't know yet, she admitted. But it's the closest I've felt to it since my mother died. He reached up, touched her cheek with those careful hands. You know I'm still broken, still carrying all that grief. We're all broken, Elias, but broken things can still be useful, can still be beautiful. She covered his hand with hers. Besides, I'm good at mending. He leaned his forehead against hers, and they stood there in the fading light. 2 people who'd found each other in a snowstorm and were slowly learning that sometimes the best shelter isn't a place. It's a person who sees all your cracks and broken places and offers warmth anyway. When you find your sister, he said quietly, bring her here if she needs a place. We'll make room. We, he pulled back to look at her. Because you're right. You will be coming back. And when you do, maybe we can figure out what that happiness looks like. June smiled, feeling something settle in her chest, a certainty that had been building since that first night. It's a deal, preacher. Though I should warn you once I decide something's mine. I don't let go easy. Good, he said simply. Neither do I. Not anymore. The abandoned church sat at the edge of Gold Hollow like a wounded animal, its paint peeling, its steeple leaning slightly askew. June had come into town alone this time, following leads about Mary that had proved fruitless. She'd stopped at the church out of curiosity, drawn by its loneliness. She was examining the boarded windows when she heard footsteps on the wooden sidewalk. A woman approached well-dressed despite the frontier setting, with dark hair severely pulled back and eyes the color of winter ice. Admiring Elias's handiwork? The woman asked, her voice cultured. With an Eastern accent, June turned slowly. She knew who this must be even before the woman spoke again. I'm Martha Boone, or I suppose I'm Martha Whitfield again now. She studied June with those cold eyes. And you must be the woman who's taken up residence in my husband's cabin. Ex-husband, June corrected quietly. And I've taken up nothing. I needed shelter. He provided it. Martha laughed, a bitter sound. How noble. Tell me, has he mentioned our son? Has he told you how Jacob died? Fever, June said, while Elias was away. While he was away preaching to strangers about God's love. Martha's composure cracked slightly. 3 days Jacob burned with fever. 3 days I prayed for my husband to come home. He was giving last rites to some miner's widow 50 miles away. Her voice hardened. Always someone else's crisis. Always another soul to save. June said nothing, sensing the woman needed to speak her grief. When he finally came home, Jacob was gone. I'd buried him myself, with the help of neighbors. Martha touched the church door. Elias stood right here and wept. Too late, always too late, It wasn't his fault, June said softly. Surely you know that. Wasn't it? Martha's eyes flashed. He chose this life, chose to leave us again and again. And for what? This, she gestured at the abandoned church. He couldn't even continue after Jacob died, ran away to that mountain like the coward he is. He's not a coward. June's voice was firm. He's a man who lost everything. He didn't lose everything. He threw it away. Martha stepped closer. I came back to settle some property matters. Imagine my surprise when I heard he'd taken in a woman, the hermit preacher, suddenly playing house. Why are you really here? June asked. It's not about property. Martha was quiet for a moment. Then I wanted him to suffer, the way I suffered, the way Jacob suffered. Her voice broke slightly. But seeing this church, remembering, I just feel tired. He does suffer, June said. Every day. He keeps a memorial for Jacob on the mountain, visits it religiously. A memorial? Martha's composure slipped further. What kind? Metal pieces hanging from a tree. They sing in the wind. June reached into her pocket, pulled out another small item she'd been carrying, a button from her mother's Sunday dress. I added my mother's thimble to it. Seemed right. Somehow. 2 lost souls keeping each other company. Martha stared at the button in June's hand. Then, unexpectedly, she reached into her own bag and pulled out a small tin soldier, painted red and blue. This was Jacob's favorite, she said, her voice barely a whisper. He called it Captain Brave. June held out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Martha placed the soldier in her palm. I'll make sure it joins the others. June promised. If you'd like. Martha nodded, unable to speak. They stood in silence for a moment. 2 women bound by their connection to the same grieving man. He's not the same man you left, June said finally. The mountains changed him, made him quiet, careful, but there's still good in him. Still kindness. I know. Martha wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. That's what made it worse. If he'd been cruel, if he'd been selfish, I could have hated him properly, but he was just devoted to everyone but us. He's different now, sees only what's in front of him. Martha studied her. You love him. It wasn't a question, but June answered anyway. I think I might, given time. He's not easy to love. Too much guilt, too much need to save everyone. I'm not looking to be saved, June said. Neither is he anymore. Maybe that's why it works. Martha straightened her dress, composed herself. I'm returning east tomorrow. The papers I came for, they're divorce papers. Final ones. I've remarried a banker in Philadelphia. A good man who comes home every night. I'm glad, June said, meaning it. Everyone deserves that. Yes, Martha agreed. They do. She turned to go, then looked back. Take care of him. He's not as strong as he pretends. None of us are. Martha nodded once more and walked away, her back straight, her step determined. June watched her go, then looked down at the tin soldier in her hand. Captain Brave. Jacob had called it. She wondered if the boy had inherited his father's desire to save everyone, his mother's fierce independence. She was still standing there when Elias found her. He pulled up in the wagon, his face tight with concern. "Heard in town that Martha was here," he said without preamble. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." June climbed up beside him. "She's fine too, sad, but fine." He looked at the church, then away. "Did she say anything about Jacob?" June held out the tin soldier. "She wanted this to join his memorial." Elias took the toy with shaking hands, turned it over carefully. "Captain Brave, he slept with this every night." His voice was thick. "Martha kept it." "She loved him. Elias loves him still. She just couldn't forgive." "I couldn't either. Still can't." He clutched the soldier. "Can't forgive myself for being gone, for choosing strangers over my own son." June touched his arm. "Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe it's just about living with what happened and choosing to continue anyway." They rode back to the cabin in silence. But it was a different kind of quiet than before, deeper, more complete. At the memorial tree, Elias added the tin soldier himself, his hands steady now. June added her mother's button, and they stood together listening to the metal sing. "Martha's divorcing me," he said finally. "Official papers. She's remarried." "How do you feel about that?" He considered, free, sad, guilty. He looked at her, but mostly free. That evening, June made supper while Elias read by the fire, but she noticed he kept looking up from his book, watching her move about the cabin. Finally, she set down her spoon. "What is it?" "Martha saw it, that you care for me." June felt heat rise in her cheeks, but didn't look away. Was she wrong? "Were you when you said you might love me, given time?" She crossed to him, took the book from his hands. "I've had time. These days with you, they've been worth months anywhere else." He pulled her down to sit beside him, his arm going around her shoulders. "I'm still broken, June, still carrying all this weight." "I know." She leaned into him. "But you're carrying it forward now, not just in circles." They sat watching the fire, comfortable in their closeness. Outside, snow began to fall again, but lightly this time, like a blessing rather than a burial. "I should tell you," Elias said quietly. "I went to town today for more than supplies. Sent telegrams to the mining camps, asking about Mary. Described her, mentioned the man she left with." June sat up. "Elias, you need to find her, and when you do, you'll both need a place to come home to." He met her eyes. "If you want it, if you'll have me, broken pieces and all." "Only if you'll have me," June said, stubborn and sharp-tongued and too practical for my own good. "Deal," he said, and kissed her forehead. "Though I should warn you, I snore, and I read scripture at odd hours, and sometimes I still talk to Jacob like he's here. And I organize everything twice, and I can't make coffee worth a damn, and sometimes I cry for no reason at all. Then we're perfectly matched in our imperfections." June smiled, settling back against him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the search for Mary, the gossip of the town, the slow work of building something from the ashes of their separate griefs. But tonight, in the warmth of the cabin with Elias's arm around her and snow falling soft outside, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt home. The tin soldiers sang with the other memorial pieces in the wind, and somewhere in heaven or memory or the space between, a little boy named Jacob smiled to see his Captain Brave still standing guard, still protecting those who needed shelter from the storm. June's room at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a window that looked out onto Gold Hollow's muddy main street. She'd been there 3 days, having left Elias's cabin to pursue new information about Mary. The separation sat heavy in her chest, but she'd needed to do this alone. She was mending a torn petticoat when Mrs. Henderson knocked. The older woman entered with a tea tray and a knowing look. "That hermit preacher was asking after you at the general store," she said, setting down the tray. "Looked like a man who'd lost his best horse." June kept her eyes on her sewing. "I told him I needed time to think. Think about what child, whether you want to be happy, Mrs. Henderson poured the tea. "I've run this boarding house for 20 years. Seen plenty of women thinking themselves right out of good situations." "It's not that simple. There's talk. There's always talk." The older woman sat heavily on the bed. "You want to know what I heard about Elias Boone? I heard he sat with my father when he was dying, back when Elias had the church. Sat there for 2 days straight, reading scripture and holding his hand. I heard he gave his own coat to the widow Murphy's boy one winter. I heard he baptized babies and buried the dead and never asked for more than what folks could spare." June set down her needle. "What about when his son died?" Mrs. Henderson's face softened. "Ah, that was a tragedy. Martha was always a hard woman, but losing Jacob broke something in both of them. Elias blamed himself for being away. Martha blamed him too. Sometimes grief needs a target, and he was convenient. Martha came to town. We spoke. Did she tell you how the church ladies tried to help, how we brought food, offered to sit with Jacob so she could rest? She refused it all, too proud, insisted on nursing him alone." Mrs. Henderson shook her head, not saying she was wrong to be angry when Elias didn't make it back in time, just saying there's always more to a story than one person's telling. June sipped her tea, thinking. "People say he abandoned his calling. People say a lot of things, but I remember the last sermon he gave, 2 weeks after Jacob's funeral. Man could barely stand, but he got up there and spoke about loss and faith and how sometimes God's plan feels like punishment." The older woman's eyes grew distant. "Half the congregation was crying by the end. He said he couldn't stand there and pretend to have answers when all he had was questions. That's not abandoning a calling. That's honesty." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window, June saw a crowd gathering near the saloon. She recognized one of the men, a miner, who'd been asking about missing girls in the camps. "I should go," June said, already reaching for her shawl. The crowd was mostly men, rough-looking types from the mining camps. At the center stood the miner she'd spoken with days ago, Paul Hutchins. "Founder," he was saying. "That girl you were asking about, Miss Mary Laramie, she's up at Silver Creek Camp, working at the company store." June pushed through the crowd. "Is she all right? Is she safe?" Hutchins' face was grim. "Safe enough, for now. But that man she run off with, Frank Morrison, he's long gone. Left her with debts and promises he never meant to keep." June's heart sank. It was what she'd feared but hoped against. "How much does she owe?" $40 to the company store. They won't let her leave until it's paid." $40. It might as well have been $400. June had maybe $10 to her name, and that only because Elias had insisted on paying her for the sewing she'd done. "I'll figure something out," she said. "Thank you for finding her." She turned to go and nearly collided with Tom Garrett. The blacksmith's face was flushed with drink, his smile unpleasant. "Heard you're looking for money," he said loudly. "Might be I could help with that, for the right price." June tried to step around him, but he blocked her path. "I don't need your help, Mr. Garrett." "No, $40 is a lot of money for a woman with no means," his voice carried, drawing more attention. "Course, there's ways a pretty woman can earn that kind of money, ways that don't require much skill, if you catch my meaning." The crowd murmured, some men laughing, others looking uncomfortable. June felt rage rise in her throat. "The only trade I know is honest work," she said clearly, which is more than can be said for a man who tries to buy what he can't earn. Garrett's face darkened. "You got a sharp tongue for someone who spent a week alone with the hermit preacher. Maybe I should ask him what kind of honest work you did up there." He never finished the sentence. A fist connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling into the mud. Elias stood over him, his face calm but his eyes blazing. You want to finish that thought? Elias asked quietly. Garrett scrambled to his feet, mud dripping from his clothes. You dare! I dare. Elias stepped forward, and Garrett stepped back. You got something to say about Miss Laramie. You say it to me, but choose your words careful. I may have left the church, but I haven't forgotten how to defend what's right. She ain't worth it, Garrett spit. Ruined woman, playing at being decent. This time it was June who moved, but Elias caught her arm. He's not worth your knuckles, he said softly. Then, louder, Mr. Garrett, you're going to walk away now. You're going to stop spreading poison about Miss Laramie. And if I hear you've so much as looked at her wrong, we'll continue this conversation somewhere private. Understand? Something in Elias's voice, the calm certainty of a man who'd found his line in the sand, made Garrett pale. He muttered something under his breath and pushed through the crowd, leaving a trail of mud. The crowd began to disperse, but June heard the whispers starting. The hermit preacher defending her honor, the implications of his presence, the violence so at odds with his former calling. She touched Elias's arm. You shouldn't have done that. It'll only make more talk. Let them talk. He flexed his hand, wincing slightly. Are you all right? I found Mary. She's at Silver Creek Camp, but... June's voice caught. She's in debt. $40. I don't have it. We have it. Elias, no, I can't. You can and you will. He took her arm, guided her away from the remaining gawkers. Did you think I'd let you face this alone? Did you think I'd sit on that mountain while you tried to save your sister with $10 and determination? It's not your responsibility. June. He stopped walking, turned to face her. When are you going to understand your burdens are mine now? By choice, by promise, by whatever name you want to put on what's between us. She looked up at him, this man who'd hidden from the world for 4 years but had come down from his mountain to defend her honor and offer his help. The whole town saw you hit him. Good. They'll say you've fallen from grace. The preacher who chose violence. I chose you, he said simply. Grace has nothing to do with letting a good woman be slandered. If that's falling, I'll gladly fall. June felt tears threaten. I left the cabin because I thought I needed to prove I could still stand alone, that I wasn't just hiding behind you. You can stand alone, Elias said. You've proved that over and over, but you don't have to. Not anymore. He touched her face gently. Come home, June. Let's get your sister together. She leaned into his touch. Your reputation was already ruined when I walked away from that church. At least now it's ruined for something worthwhile. He smiled slightly. Besides, defending your honor is the most ministry I've done in years. Felt good. Your hand doesn't look like it felt good. Worth it to see Garrett in the mud where he belongs. Despite everything, June laughed. Elias Boone, I think you enjoyed that. Maybe a little. He grew serious again. We'll leave for Silver Creek in the morning. Bring Mary home. Figure out the rest from there. Home, June repeated softly. When did your cabin become home? The night you knocked on my door, he said. I just didn't know it yet. They walked back toward the boarding house. June's hand tucked in his arm. The townspeople watched, some with disapproval, others with curiosity. But June found she truly didn't care anymore. Let them talk. Let them judge. She'd found something worth more than their good opinion, a man who'd come down from his self-imposed exile to stand beside her, who offered not just shelter, but partnership. Elias, she said as they reached the boarding house steps. Thank you for defending me, for offering to help with Mary, for everything. Thank me by coming home, he said. The cabin's too quiet without you correcting my coffee and beating me at cards. Tomorrow, she promised. After I pack what little I have here. Tomorrow, he agreed. And June, Next time Garrett opens his mouth, let me know before you try to hit him. Want to make sure I don't miss the show." She laughed again, feeling lighter than she had in days. Tomorrow they'd face the journey to Silver Creek, the challenge of freeing Mary, the weight of more gossip and speculation. But tonight, she had this Elias's steady presence, his scarred knuckles proof of his choice, his promise that she didn't have to carry her burdens alone. As he walked away, several townspeople stopped to stare. The hermit preacher, walking tall down Main Street, mud on his boots and purpose in his stride. June watched from her window as he stopped at the general store, emerged with supplies, planning for their journey. She realized, taking care of what needed doing. "Mrs. Henderson appeared at her shoulder. "That's a man who's remembered who he is," the older woman said approvingly. "Sometimes it takes defending something precious to remind us we're still capable of fighting." "He's going to be the talk of the town," June said. "Child, he's been the talk of the town for 4 years. At least now they're talking about something real instead of just tragedy." Mrs. Henderson patted her shoulder. "You brought him back to life. Don't you dare feel guilty for that." June watched until Elias disappeared from view, heading back to the mountain. "Tomorrow," she thought, "tomorrow I go home." And for the first time since leaving Laramie, she meant somewhere more than just a building. She meant a person, a partnership, a future being built from the ashes of their separate pasts. It was messy and complicated and sure to invite judgment. It was also the best thing that had happened to either of them. The snow had started falling again as June approached Elias's cabin, her small bag of belongings clutched in one hand. The blanket she'd sewn during her days at the boarding house folded over her other arm. She'd spent 2 days finishing it a wedding ring pattern in blues and browns, colors that reminded her of mountain sky and earth. The cabin door opened before she could knock. Elias stood there, lamplight behind him casting shadows across his face. He looked tired, she thought, like he hadn't slept well in her absence. "You came back," he said simply. "I said I would." She held out the blanket. "Made this. Thought the cabin could use something besides those old army blankets." He took it carefully, running his fingers over the intricate stitching. "It's beautiful. Must have taken hours." "I had time, Mrs. Henderson let me use her scrap basket." June stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of wood smoke and coffee. "Besides, I needed something to keep my hands busy while I thought." "And what did you think about—" She set down her bag, turned to face him. "About second chances, about how we both got left at our own train stations, you by God, when he took Jacob and me by Samuel, about how maybe that's what led us here." Elias spread the blanket over his bed, their bed. June thought with a flutter in her chest. The pattern caught the firelight, the interlocking rings seeming to glow. "Wedding rings," he observed quietly. Mrs. Henderson suggested the pattern, said it was fitting." June felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I can make a different one if—" "No." He turned to her, something soft and wondering in his eyes. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "Elias, I mean it. You came into my life like grace itself, unexpected, unearned, but exactly what I needed." He crossed to her, took her hands. "I've been thinking too, about how I hid up here, convinced I didn't deserve happiness after failing Jacob. But maybe that's the worst kind of pride, deciding for God what I do or don't deserve." June squeezed his hands, feeling the calluses, the strength. "We leave for Silver Creek in the morning. Everything's ready. Supplies, the wagon, money for Mary's debt." He paused. "I also did something else." "What?" He moved to the table, picked up a folded paper. "Wrote to the church board in Cheyenne. Told them I'm ready to return to ministry, if they'll have me. Not necessarily preaching, I don't know if I'm ready for that, but something, teaching, maybe, or working with the mission." June felt tears prick her eyes. "Oh, Elias." "It might come to nothing. They might not want a minister who abandoned his post, who's been living like a hermit for 4 years. He set down the paper. But you were right. Hiding up here isn't ministry, it's just hiding. She went to him then, wrapped her arms around his waist. He held her close, his chin resting on her head. And for a moment they just stood there. Two people who'd found each other in the wilderness. Whatever happens, June said against his chest, we'll face it together. Together, he agreed. Then, pulling back to look at her, June, I need to ask you something. She waited, seeing him gather courage. When we bring Mary back, when the talk dies down, when things settle, would you consider? He stopped, started again. What I mean is, that blanket you made those wedding rings? Yes, June said simply. He blinked. Yes. Did you think I'd say no after everything? She touched his face. I'm not a girl anymore. Elias, I know what I want. I want a life with you, here or wherever you're called to go. I want to wake up beside you every morning and know that neither of us is alone anymore. The talk will follow us regardless. Might as well give them something true to gossip about. She smiled. Besides, Mrs. Henderson is already planning the wedding dinner. Seemed presumptuous to disappoint her. Elias laughed, the sound filling the cabin like music. When? After we get Mary settled. After you hear back from the church board. When it feels right? She paused. Unless you want to wait longer. He silenced her with a kiss. Gentle but sure. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. I've waited 4 years to feel alive again. He said, I don't intend to waste any more time. They prepared dinner together. The ease between them even more natural after their brief separation. June told him about the confrontation with Garrett, about Mrs. Henderson's stories, about the telegram she'd sent to her other siblings telling them she was safe and had found Mary. Will they come for the wedding? Elias asked. Maybe. Thomas might, he's the next oldest. The others... She shrugged. We scattered after Papa died, everyone finding their own way. We'll be your family now, you and Mary and me. He paused, then added quietly, maybe others, in time, if God wills it. June felt her heart skip. Children. He was talking about children. The possibility hung between them, bright and terrifying and wonderful. One step at a time, she said softly. First Mary, then marriage, then we'll see. After dinner, they sat by the fire. June working on another sewing project while Elias read aloud from Ecclesiastes. His voice was different when he read scripture. She noticed deeper, more resonant, touched with the authority of his calling even after years away from the pulpit. 2 are better than 1, he read, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. June set down her sewing. That's beautiful. It goes on. Again, if 2 lie together, then they have heat, but how can one be warm alone? He closed the book. I was cold for so long. June, not just physically, cold all the way through. And now? He looked at her across the small space between their chairs. Now I remember what warmth feels like. Later, as they prepared for sleep, still maintaining the propriety of separate beds until marriage, June watched Elias bank the fire, check the door, perform all the small rituals of securing the cabin for the night. She thought about the nights she'd spent here before, sick and fevered, and how he'd watched over her. How different things were now, yet how much the same. Elias, she called softly. He turned from the fire. Yes, I'm glad my wagon broke down where it did. Glad the snow drove me to your door. So am I. He moved to stand beside her bed, looking down at her with those gray eyes that had seen so much sorrow, but were learning to see joy again. Sleep well, June. Tomorrow we bring your sister home. Our sister, she corrected. You said we're family now. He smiled, touched her hair briefly. Our sister, then our family. She caught his hand before he could move away. That promise you made the first night about letting me sleep if I promised to wake up as yours. I remember. I want to make you the same promise. She squeezed his fingers. I'll let you sleep tonight, alone in your chair by the fire, but only if you promise that when we're married, you'll wake up as mine, every morning, no matter what comes. His voice was rough with emotion. I promise. Then sleep well, my love. Tomorrow our real life begins. He bent and kissed her forehead, gentle as a blessing. Then he retreated to his chair, pulling one of the old blankets around his shoulders. June lay in the bed they would soon share, covered by the wedding ring quilt she'd made with her own hands, and listened to the fire settle and the wind sing through the memorial tree outside. Soon she would face the journey to Silver Creek, the reunion with Mary, the complexities of building a new family from the pieces of their broken ones. There would be challenges, money to manage, reputations to rebuild, a ministry to possibly return to. But tonight, in the warmth of the cabin with Elias keeping watch as he had that first night, June felt nothing but peace. She'd come searching for her sister and found so much more. Found a man who saw her strength instead of her scandal, who offered partnership instead of rescue. Found a home that was more than walls and a roof. It was shared meals and quiet evenings, gentle touches and promised tomorrows. June! Elias's voice came soft through the darkness. Thank you for coming back, for the quilt, for everything. Thank you, she replied, for opening your door that night, for being worth coming back to. She heard him shift in his chair, heard the smile in his voice when he spoke again. Sleep now. Long day tomorrow. June closed her eyes, pulled the wedding ring quilt up to her chin, and slept better than she had in years. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin, two hearts that had been winter frozen were finally, fully, beginning to thaw. In the morning, they would start their journey to save Mary, but tonight they had saved each other, and that was more than enough. The spring festival in Gold Hollow was modest compared to the celebrations back east, but the whole town turned out nonetheless. Banners stretched across Main Street, and the smell of roasting meat mixed with the sweetness of fresh-baked pies. June smoothed her sky-blue dress, one she'd sewn herself in the week since returning with Mary, and tried to calm her nerves. You look beautiful, Mary said, adjusting the collar of June's dress. At 17, her younger sister had lost some of her wildness in the months since they'd brought her home from Silver Creek. The experience with Frank Morrison had taught her hard lessons about trust and promises. I feel like everyone's staring, June admitted, watching the townspeople set up tables in the square. They are, Mary said bluntly, but not for the reasons you think. Through the window of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, June could see Elias helping to raise a tent for the festivities. He worked alongside the other men, his sleeves rolled up, his movements sure, the hermit preacher, back among the living. He's different, Mary observed, following June's gaze. Happier. We both are. It had been 2 months since they'd brought Mary home. 2 months of building a new kind of family in the mountain cabin. The church board in Cheyenne had responded favorably to Elias's letter, offering him a position teaching at their small seminary. He hadn't decided yet, wanting to be sure of his path before committing. Come on, Mary said, tugging June's arm. Can't hide up here all day? They descended to the street, where the festival was gaining momentum. June was immediately aware of the looks, the whispered conversations that stopped as they passed. But something was different today. Mrs. Henderson intercepted them near the pie table, beaming. June, dear, I've been looking for you. The church ladies are organizing the supper service, and we could use your help. She lowered her voice. Sarah Morrison particularly asked for you. Said anyone who could make a wedding ring quilt that fine ought to be teaching the younger girls. June blinked, surprised. Sarah Morrison had been one of the coldest to her when news of her staying with Elias first spread. She did. People come around, dear, especially when they see real happiness. Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. Besides, that man of yours has been working like 3 men to help set up. Won him some admirers. As if summoned by the conversation, Elias appeared, sweat on his brow despite the cool spring air. He smiled when he saw June, the expression transforming his weathered features. "Ladies," he said, nodding to Mrs. Henderson and Mary. Then, to June, "Walk with me." She took his offered arm, aware of the eyes following them as they moved through the crowd. But there were smiles now. 2 nods of acknowledgement near the lumber booth. John Patterson actually tipped his hat. "What did you do?" June asked quietly. "Nothing special. Helped Patterson rebuild his fence last week. Sat with the widow Murphy when she was poorly." Elias shrugged. "Turns out hiding on a mountain doesn't fix anything. Being useful does." They stopped near the small platform where the town band was setting up. Children ran past, laughing, and June felt a familiar pang. Someday, perhaps. "June Mr. Boone," a voice called out. They turned to see Reverend Davies, the circuit preacher who served Gold Hollow once a month. He approached with a warm smile, his wife beside him. "Reverend," Elias said, shaking the man's hand. There was still a slight stiffness when he interacted with other clergy. June noticed, old wounds healing slowly. "I heard you might be heading to Cheyenne." Reverend Davies said, "The seminary position." "Still considering it." Elias replied, "Want to be sure it's the right move." "Well, if you need a recommendation, you have it." The Reverend's expression was sincere. "Any man who comes down from his grief to help others has my respect. The church needs men who've wrestled with doubt and come out the other side." His wife touched June's arm. "I've heard about your sewing circle. My daughter would love to join if you have room." "Of course." June managed, overwhelmed. The sewing circle had been Mary's idea, a way for June to teach and earn money while building connections in the community. It had started with just the 3 of them in the cabin and had grown to 8 regulars. As the Davies moved on, Elias guided June to a quieter corner of the square. "You all right?" "I didn't expect this," she admitted. "The acceptance, after everything." "Tom Garrett left town," Elias said. "Did you know took a railroad job heading west, and Martha sent a letter to Mrs. Henderson, saying she was glad I'd found happiness again. Word spreads. A good word, for once." "June." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "I've decided about Cheyenne." Her heart skipped. "And I want to take the position, but only if you're willing to leave here, to start fresh in a new place, build a new life." "Elias Boone," June said, squeezing his hands. "I would follow you anywhere. You should know that by now. And Mary has already threatened to elope with the baker's son if we try to leave her behind." June smiled. "She says someone needs to keep us from being too serious all the time." He laughed, pulling her closer, around them. The festival continued, but June felt like they were in their own small world. 2 weeks, Elias said. Reverend Davies agreed to perform the ceremony, small service, just close friends and family. Then we can head to Cheyenne, start our new life properly. 2 weeks, June repeated, her heart full. "I suppose I should finish your wedding shirt then. And I should finish the repairs on the cabin for whoever takes it next." His expression grew thoughtful. "Strange to think of leaving it. It saved me. In a way, gave me space to grieve. It saved us both," June said. "But maybe that's what shelters are for, to keep us safe until we're ready to venture out again." A commotion near the platform drew their attention. The band had started playing, and couples were beginning to dance. Elias looked at June questioningly. "I don't really know how," he admitted. "Martha and we never danced." "Neither did Samuel and I," June said. "But maybe that's the point. Everything we do now is new, ours." He led her to the makeshift dance floor, and they fumbled through the steps together, laughing when they stumbled, finding their rhythm slowly. Other couples joined them, and June noticed the looks had changed entirely now. Instead of scandal and whisper, there was something like approval, even envy, perhaps, from those who saw what two broken people had built together. "Look," Mary said, appearing at June's elbow during a break in the music. "Mrs. Morrison is coming over with her daughter." Indeed, Sarah Morrison approached with determined steps, her daughter Emma beside her. The woman who had snubbed June just weeks ago now wore an expression of cautious friendliness. "Miss Laramie," she said formally, then seemed to reconsider. "June, I owe you an apology." June waited, not making it easier, but not cruel either. "I judged hastily, spoke unkindly." Sarah's voice was stiff but sincere. "I see now that you and Mr. Boone have found something real, something blessed. Even, I hope you'll accept my apology." "Of course," June said, meaning it. "We all judge sometimes. The grace is in recognizing when we're wrong." Sarah's face relaxed. "Emma would very much like to join your sewing circle. She's quite talented." "We meet Tuesday afternoons," June said. "She's welcome any time." As the Morrisons moved away, Mary whistled low. "That was something." "People change," June said, watching Elias help an elderly woman to a chair. "Given the chance and a reason, people can surprise you." The afternoon wore on, full of small miracles of acceptance. The bank manager's wife complimented June's dress. The mercantile owner asked Elias about his thoughts on starting a men's Bible study. Children who had stared at the hermit preacher with fear now ran to him, begging for rides on his shoulders. As the sun began to sink, painting the mountains gold, June found herself standing with Elias at the edge of the square. Mary was dancing with the baker's son, laughing at something he said. The town that had whispered and judged now seemed to embrace them. Not fully, perhaps, but enough. "No regrets?" Elias asked, his arm around her waist. "None," June said firmly. "You." "Only that it took a blizzard and a broken wagon to bring us together." "The Lord works in mysterious ways," June quoted, smiling, "even through broken axles and stubborn women who won't stop knocking on doors." "Especially through those," Elias agreed. "June, I love you. Thought you should know that, here in front of everyone, with no shame or hesitation." June turned to face him, not caring who watched. "And I love you, Elias Boone, broken pieces, healing heart, and all." He kissed her then, there in the middle of Gold Hollow's spring festival, and June heard something that sounded remarkably like applause. When they broke apart, Mrs. Henderson was beaming at them, and even stern old Judge Williams was nodding approval. "2 weeks can't come fast enough," Elias murmured. "No," June agreed. "But we've waited this long. What's 2 more weeks?" As the stars began to appear above the mountains, June stood in the circle of Elias's arms and watched their community, their new family, celebrate around them. It wasn't the life she'd planned when she left Laramie. It was far better. It was real and hard-won and precious. And in 2 weeks, it would be forever. The lamp burned low in the cabin, casting dancing shadows on the walls. June lay on her side, her hand resting on Elias's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. They had been married for 6 months now, and the wonder of it still caught her sometimes, this permission to touch, to be close, to belong to each other completely. "Can't sleep," Elias murmured, his voice rough with drowsiness. "Just thinking." She traced lazy patterns on his nightshirt. Remember that first night when you said you'd let me sleep if I promised to wake up as yours? She felt him smile in the darkness. How could I forget boldest thing I'd ever said to a woman? And I was too fevered to properly appreciate it. June shifted closer, tucking her head beneath his chin. Though I think I knew even then, something in me recognized something in you. His arm tightened around her. June. I need to tell you something. His voice grew serious. The letter from Cheyenne, I haven't been entirely honest about what it said. June stilled. They'd been in the city for 3 months now. Elias teaching at the seminary while June had established a thriving seamstress business. Mary was enrolled in the church school, courting a young man studying for ministry. Everything had seemed perfect. What do you mean? They offered me more than just teaching. They want me to take over the mission church on the other side of the city, the one that serves the mining families, the poor districts. He paused. It would mean less money, harder work, more like real ministry than what I'm doing now. June pushed up on her elbow to look at him, though she could barely make out his features in the dim light. And you want to do it? I think so, but I wanted to talk to you first. It affects us both, all 3 of us. 4, June said softly. 4. Then understanding dawned. June, are you... I saw Dr. Morrison yesterday. He confirmed it. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. Come, Autumn. There'll be 4 of us. Elias sat up so quickly he nearly knocked her over, fumbling to light the lamp properly. When the light flared, she could see the joy and terror warring on his face. A baby, he breathed. Our baby. Our baby, June confirmed, watching him carefully. I know it might bring back memories of... No. He cupped her face in his hands. No, don't. This is different. This is ours. Our future. His voice broke slightly. I want to do better this time. Be present. Be here. You will be. June covered his hands with hers. We both will. And about the mission church, if that's where you're called, that's where we go. Money isn't everything. You're sure it'll be harder. The parsonage is small, the neighborhood rough. Elias Boone, when have we ever chosen the easy path? June smiled. Besides, those mining families need someone who understands loss and hardship. Who better than us? He kissed her then, deep and grateful, and when they pulled apart, both were crying a little. How did I get so lucky? He whispered. To have this second chance. Not luck, June said. Providence. God knew what he was doing when he broke my wagon wheel near your cabin. They lay back down, Elias's hand protective over where their child grew. Outside, they could hear the city stirring so different from the mountain's silence, but home now because they were together. I've been thinking about names, June said into the quiet. Already? If it's a boy... She hesitated, then forged ahead. I'd like to call him Jacob, not to replace your son, but to honor him, to carry the name forward. Elias was quiet for so long she worried she'd overstepped. Then he spoke, his voice thick. Jacob Elias Boone, after both of us. And if it's a girl... Grace, he said without hesitation, because that's what you brought into my life. June smiled against his shoulder. Grace Martha Boone, after both our pasts, pointing toward our future. Perfect. He shifted to look at her. June, that promise I asked for that first night, have I kept it? Have I let you sleep peacefully? She thought about their life together, the quiet mornings, the shared work, the way he still watched over her with protective care. The nightmares that had plagued her after Samuel's abandonment had faded. The anxiety that had driven her through blizzards seeking Mary had calmed. You have, she said every night. And you, his thumb stroked her cheek. You promised to wake up as mine. Do you? Every morning, June confirmed. Though I think I was yours from that first night, just took us both a while to realize it. I love you, he said simply. You and Mary and this little one not yet born. You're my family, my purpose, my home. And you're ours. June yawned, the late hour finally catching up. We should sleep. You have classes tomorrow, and I have 3 dresses to finish. In a moment. Elias pulled her close, his hand still resting protectively over their future. Want to remember this. Want to hold on to it. June understood. After so much loss, so much loneliness, the abundance of their present life sometimes felt too good to be real. But it was real, the man beside her, the child within her, the sister asleep in the next room, the work that waited with the dawn. Elias, she said sleepily. Yes, love. Let's make each other the same promise every night. You'll let me sleep, and I'll let you sleep. But only if we both promise to wake up together, to face whatever comes, joy or sorrow, abundance or want, as one. I promise, he said solemnly, every night for the rest of our lives. Then sleep, my love, and wake up mine. He extinguished the lamp, and darkness settled over them like a blanket. But it wasn't the cold darkness of their separate griefs anymore. This was the warm darkness of shared space, of bodies curved together in familiar comfort, of hearts that had learned to beat in rhythm. June felt herself drifting towards sleep, safe in the circle of Elias's arms, somewhere in the city. A church bell tolled midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another, time moving forward, carrying them away from their pasts and toward their future. She thought of that first night, shivering with cold and fever, knocking on a stranger's door. How could she have known that she was knocking on the door of her future, that the sad-eyed hermit who answered would become her husband, her partner, her home? Thank you, she whispered, not sure if she was talking to Elias or to God or to the providence that had guided her through that storm. For what? Elias mumbled, already half asleep. For opening the door, for keeping your promise, for all of it. His arm tightened around her. Thank you for knocking, for not giving up, for seeing past the broken parts to what could be. They fell asleep like that, wound together in their narrow bed. 2 people who had found in each other not just love, but resurrection. Outside, snow began to fall, not the harsh blizzard that had brought them together, but gentle flakes that blessed the city with quiet beauty. And when morning came, as it always did, they woke together. June opened her eyes to find Elias already awake, watching her with that mixture of wonder and gratitude that never seemed to fade. Good morning, Mrs. Boone, he said, as he did every morning. Good morning, Mr. Boone, she replied, as she always did. Did you sleep well? Like a man with nothing left to fear. He kissed her forehead. And you, like a woman who's finally home. They rose together to face the day, teaching and sewing, ministry and family, the ordinary miracles of a life rebuilt from ashes. The cabin on the mountain stood empty now, but its purpose had been served. It had sheltered 2 broken people long enough for them to heal, to find each other, to discover that sometimes the greatest gift isn't having someone save you, it's having someone who makes you brave enough to save yourself. And in a small parsonage in Cheyenne, as summer ripened toward autumn and new life grew between them, Elias and June Boone kept their promises. Every night, they let each other sleep. Every morning, they woke up belonging to each other. It was, they both agreed, the best deal either had ever made. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope June and Elias's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners from all over the world and hearing your thoughts about these frontier romances. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit the hype button to help more people discover these tales of love and redemption in the American frontier. Your support means everything and helps me continue bringing these historical romances to life. Until next time, partners.